Martha, there are never any surprises where it comes to the pharmaceutical industry giving us another drug that's causing us some kind of health issues, if not death. And there's never any surprise when they make $3 or $4 billion a year doing that. Fosamax, just another story. I hate to say it, but it really is just another one of those pharmaceutical Merck, Pfizer type stories.
Well, you're right. There is an element of repetition in all of these, which is they hit and run. Like a bad stock or a bad movie. They make their money real quickly, and then when the truth comes out, they've made their money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what we've found is that early on, of course, we've handled every major pharmaceutical case in the country, and I've always seen the pattern. The pattern is the company coming in, doing like what they call a 5-year projection. That is to say, can we keep it out there for 5 years? And if we do, how much can we make in that 5 years? And if we make $4 billion, can we get away with settling the entire thing for $2 billion? So they come out $2 billion ahead. It's almost the same analysis that we saw with Ford Pinto, and where they figured out, we can cause this many deaths by exploding gas tanks, and it's only going to cost X number of dollars, therefore let's keep it out there. The Fosamax story really is that story. I got to tell you. Go ahead and tell me what you have learned about the Fosamax story, and let's share notes.
Okay, surely. And by the way, you're absolutely right. They build the settlements right into the profit scene. Well, I've been writing about Fosamax, which was the first bisphosphonate since about 2006, and there was just a progression of dangerous side effects that surfaced that Merck did not disclose. And the first, of course, was esophageal irritation, where you had to sit up upright and you couldn't have food or water for 60 minutes after taking the drug. And that was not known when the drug was approved, so they had to add that warning after it was already being taken. And then after that, you had, of course, the osteonecrosis of the jaw. And some of the dentists and oral surgeons who were seeing this were just furious because they really doubted that Merck didn't know. And now many of these dentists and oral surgeons won't even work on women, some men,
right,
but mostly women.
Well, let me back up just a minute. Even with the reflux, this esophagitis, the issue really came down to there's something called scar-based cancer. And when you have an ulcerative process taking place in the esophagus, what ends up happening is that you create scar tissue. That scar tissue has the propensity to develop into a different, very unique kind of cancer. And so that was another problem, and that was something that they didn't talk about. That was something they didn't warn about. The jawbone tissue issue was certainly something they didn't say anything about until doctors started saying, hey, there's a problem here. The necrotic condition that you're describing, describe how bad it really was. I mean, it was severe.
Well, it is, and too, Mike, it's still going on.
Right.
We like to say it's in the past tense because we're aware of it, but it's still, basically because the jaw tissues renew at a faster pace than other parts of the body, it's more susceptible to the suppression of the bone renewal that these drugs cause, and consequently, if you need renewal at a socket where a tooth might have been pulled, it won't happen, and instead that area goes necrotic and it dies. And what I read from some of the journals and the dentists and oral surgeons talking is that it was disfiguring. It was almost impossible to treat. In some cases, women had to be trached. So it was a major and
well, probably what you didn't see, Martha, that we saw was the actual documents where they talk about how do we make this go away? How do we cover this up? How do we make it look less of an impact than it actually is? And it's one thing when you start actually looking at the documents, the emails and the inter-office correspondence, where they're saying this is a problem. We know the oral surgeons are upset. We know that the doctors and the dentists are upset. What do we do to make them feel more comfortable? And that's the ugliest part of that.
It's just criminal, and I'm sure you've seen incredible documents on that. I did see a CME that these Merck-funded doctors conducted, continuing medical education, in which they actually were telling clinicians that the real source of this osteonecrosis of the jaw was bad oral hygiene. In other words, the women weren't flossing.
It's their fault.
Unbelievable, just nasty.
Let's you mentioned something I think is very important. Again, we're talking about Fosamax, which is given to women in hopes of strengthening their bones. But what happened was you had Merck actually create this dread, this hysteria that, my God, if you don't take this, your bones are gonna crumble. So what they did, and you have it in your article, and I've seen the documents firsthand, where they actually went around to doctors' offices and they put in what they call bone scan machines. They put in 10, actually it's even more than that, but around 10,000 bone scan machines where they actually put them into medical offices to try to promote this drug. Tell us about that.
Well, they being Big Pharma, invented the term osteopenia, which really meant nothing more than you're at risk of osteoporosis, which anybody could be at risk of it. And then, as you say, they hired a research company, and this is according to a good source, who planted these machines in doctors' offices, and then that promoted, the women would be told, well, you're at risk, or your wrist is thinning, or whatever it is. Just this year, there was an article in New England Journal of Medicine that said only 10% of women benefit from these scans.
Right.
But the scans were huge scams that helped sell the bone drugs.
Yeah, you say scans. It's actually scam is what it really was. It was a scam. And it was one thing if we've just seen this with one company. But, you look through all the companies where, for example, you had Yaz was a product that I took the depositions over in Europe, and the story was the same thing. Let's create hysteria. Let's create a disease. Let's create something that scares the hell out of everybody and then sell our product. At the same time they're doing that, the typical MO is not to disclose the clinical data that shows there really is no risk. I mean, or the risk is maybe a tenth of what they actually say it is, and that the dangers, the dangers of taking the drug, the risk-benefit analysis is so slanted against the drug that if the public knew it, there's no way they would take the drug. That's very, very typical, and I saw that with Fosamax, just as you've pointed out.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. And the final irony after, the cancer that you referred to, and the irregular heartbeat and the intractable pain, the final irony is these drugs actually cause the immediate and fractures that they were marketed to prevent.
Yeah. Your book, by the way, is an important book because people have a hard time believing that corporate America will take a look at people's health and say, to hell with the health, we're going to make billions of dollars, and we're going to do it on a 5-year projection because we know, and here's the statistic, if the drug is approved and it gets onto the market, they know they can fight off no matter how bad the problem is. Statistically, if you look at the history on this, they can fight off the problem for anywhere between 5 to 10 years. Now we're finding that they're saying this is to prevent your bones from fracturing. This is to prevent you developing weak bones as you get older. And now we're finding that it's actually promoting fractures of the femur. That people can simply we have cases where people are walking, just everyday walking, and the femur fractures.
For no reason, absolutely.
No reason. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, this is the most outrageous part. This is the shameless part, in my opinion. As early as 2004, the New England Journal of Medicine and another medical journal had doctors theorize that this would happen. They said if you can't suppress bone turnover and not create a desiccated bone that's likely to snap. So it's not like Merck wouldn't have known because even clinicians knew this. And so the idea is that it's the very concept of the drug is ill-conceived because it keeps the bone from renewing and consequently it's brittle and then it snaps. And that's, of course, how they tried to sell the drugs themselves was telling women that when you least expect it, one of your bones will snap. So it was a fear campaign And last summer, they finally had 2 FDA advisory committees that sat down and looked at this, and all they came up with was maybe we should limit how long women are on these.
Well, first of all, the advisory committees, and this is another MO, method of operation. You stack the advisory committee with people who have worked in the industry, sometimes directly for the company. The last advisory committee that took place, for example, on Yaz, was completely stacked with industry hacks.
Right, I heard that.
And
right.
so we knew what was going to happen before it ever happened, and sure enough, it happened. So just as a quick review here, you have a company that create hysteria. They say you've got to have something because your bones are crumbling. Then they create the Bone Measurement Institute, where it's part of the scam. They put 10,000 scan machines in doctors' offices. They then start saying that women are having what they call jaw necrosis, and it's awful. That's where the entire jaw basically disintegrates and has to be replaced by artificial jaw. We've seen cases of cancer. That 23 incidents of Fosamax cancer, esophageal cancer, 8 deaths, 27 incidents of cancer in Europe directly related to the drug. Now we find out that the very thing it's supposed to be doing is strengthening the femur, and in fact, it's causing the femur to snap. And the FDA and advisory committees are so in bed with the drug industry that they've taken no action, and nobody has gone to jail for not telling the truth.
Well, you're exactly right. No CEOs, and nor has, the reason I wrote the article is Merck is just launching a new bone drug on the heels of this, nor has Merck been prevented from doing this again. So there's not only no penalties, there's a green light to continue. There was a quote in Reuters from one of the top Merck executives, and he said their new drug may be a viable alternative for patients who want benefits beyond what they received from bisphosphonate.
Yeah, the benefit of having a necrotic jaw, the benefit of having your femur snap, the benefit of cancer. But you see, this goes on, Martha, as you've been doing this a long time. You've been writing about pharmaceuticals a long time. And you can't tell me a story where a pharmaceutical CEO and his pals have gone to prison for fraud, for lying to doctors, for lying to the medical community, for phoning up clinical records, for hiring biostitutes to write just completely fantasy stories about their drug. Nobody's gone to jail for it, and until somebody goes to jail, this will continue because it's too profitable. You make $3 billion and you pay $1 billion in settlements, so you still make a pretty good profit there.
You're right. Nobody's going to jail. None of the companies have even been removed from Medicaid and Medicare pipelines, the revenue, and nor has anyone looked at why this was approved so quickly by FDA that all these side effects came out after people were using it.
Well, we know, don't we? I mean, you and I know why it was approved quickly, and that is because the FDA is simply an extension of the pharmaceutical industry. It's a swinging door where you say somebody's with the FDA, they say help us here. By the way, how would you like to work for Merck? When you get through with this job, how would you like to work for Merck?
Triple your income. Yeah.
Exactly. Or some college professor, how would you like to write this article making it look like Fosamax is a great product? How would you like to make a cool $500,000 for writing the article?
I know.
So we see it all the time. We saw it with Yaz with off-label, where they were selling the product completely for purposes it never should have been sold for. The company knew what they were doing. They knew it was illegal. They were operating under what they call a corporate integrity agreement, where people should have gone to prison for not complying with it, and nobody went to prison. So I don't know how else to stop it, Martha, other than tell people you simply don't use a drug unless it's been on the market 10 years. I don't know what else to say.
That's what a lot of people say, and don't use anything that you've seen on advertised on TV. There's another irony for women, because I do see sexism and ageism in this marketing. Like the hormone replacement therapy, it was marketed kind of, you don't want to be old and ugly, was kind of the real message. And the irony was all these women ended up with mastectomies, And so with this, the bone drugs, they end up disfigured in the jaw through wanting to not be old and fractured, So it's like a double whammy against women.
Well, they even have a term for it. It's called learned helplessness, and it's not a very flattering term, but it is to say that, you have people in the market that would rather look good and at all costs, because that's what they've learned their entire life. It's better to be pretty than healthy.
And it's just a sad. But as you say, nobody's gone to jail, and the shameless part is it just continues. And there's so much money flooded into this, and then there's another irony about the osteoporosis, which is that the some of the asthma drugs and some of the SSRI antidepressants and certainly the GERD meds actually cause the osteoporosis to a certain extent. So actually, Big Pharma is causing its own problem in some of those cases.
Well, I mean, the truth is, Big Pharma, look at the money they're putting into this election. They understand, I think last presidential cycle, when you added up all the money they had put in was somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 million. And, I mean, so they get their way. Nobody, the argument is always we're helping people. Well, no, they're not helping people. They're on what they call a short-term big profit plan. That is where a CEO used to run a company like Merck for 20 years. Now the CEO comes in for 5 years, extracts everything he can from the company to make high bonuses, high profits, big golden parachute, leaves the company, and so there is no sustainability to any credibility here. And so that quick profit, short term is killing the drug companies. And I don't know what else to say. Somebody asked me, do you take a drug before 10 years? I used to say don't take it before 5 years. I say now 10 years, because there's always an alternative. There's always an alternative. That's what people have got to learn.
I agree with you. And I also caution people when they hear about a new so-called disease to be skeptical, because it's not from the Centers for Disease Control.
Right.
It's from Big Pharma.
Yeah, ADHD is a great example. I mean, my God, if you watch the history on ADHD, you would think that you'd have adults that, hell, they can't read a full page without losing concentration, and then you give them a drug. So it's our fault. It's Americans' fault. It's our fault as much as it is the drug company, because we let them do it.
But it's gotten a lot better or worse since the direct-to-consumer advertising, because that was my background, was advertising, and it works.
It absolutely does. We can be led around by the nose, and it's just so easy for them to do it, and that's what we see here.